Father Goriot, Honor de Balzac. The Project Gutenberg e-book of Father Goriot, by Honor de Balzac. This e-book is for the use of anyone anywhere at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this e-book or online at www.gutenberg.net. Title: Father Goriot. Author: Honor de Balzac. Release date: October 6, 2004. Ebook 1237. Language: English. Character set encoding: ASCII. Start of this Project Gutenberg ebook. Father Goriot. Produced by Dagny. Father Goriot. By Honor de Balzac. Translated by Alan Marriage. In the days before the revolution, Jean-Joachim Goriot was simply a workman in the employ of a vermicelli maker. He was a skillful, thrifty workman, sufficiently enterprising to buy his master's business when the latter fell a chance victim to the disturbances of 1789. Goriot established himself in the Rue de la Jussienne, close to the Corn Exchange. His plain good sense led him to accept the position of president of the section, so as to secure for his business the protection of those in power at that dangerous epoch. This prudent step had led to success. The foundations of his fortune were laid in the time of the scarcity, real or artificial, when the price of grain of all kinds rose enormously in Paris. People used to fight for bread at the baker's doors, while other persons went to the grocer's shops and bought Italian paste foods without brawling over it. It was during this year that Goriot made the money, which, at a later time, was to give him all the advantage of the great capitalist over the small buyer. He had, moreover, the usual luck of average ability. His mediocrity was the salvation of him. He excited no one's envy. It was not even suspected that he was rich till the peril of being rich was over, and all his intelligence was concentrated not on political, but on commercial speculations. Goriot was an authority second to none on all questions relating to corn, flour, and middlings, and the production, storage, and quality of grain. He could estimate the yield of the harvest, and foresee market prices. He bought his cereals in Sicily, and imported Russian wheat. Anyone who had heard him hold forth on the regulations that control the importation and exportation of grain, who had seen his grasp of the subject, his clear insight into the principles involved, his appreciation of weak points in the way that the system worked, would have thought that here was the stuff of which a minister is made. Patient, active, and persevering, energetic and prompt in action, he surveyed his business horizon with an eagle eye. Nothing there took him by surprise. He foresaw all things, knew all that was happening, and kept his own counsel. He was a diplomatist in his quick comprehension of a situation, and in the routine of business he was as patient and plodding as a soldier on the march. But beyond this business horizon he could not see. He used to spend his hours of leisure on the threshold of his shop, leaning against the framework of the door. Take him from his dark little counting house, and he became once more the rough, slow-witted workman, a man who cannot understand a piece of reasoning, who is indifferent to all intellectual pleasures, and falls asleep at the play, a Parisian Dolabum in short, against whose stupidity other minds are powerless. Natures of this kind are nearly all alike. In almost all of them you will find some hidden depth of sublime affection. Two all-absorbing affections filled the vermicelli maker's heart to the exclusion of every other feeling. Into them he seemed to put all the forces of his nature, as he put the whole power of his brain into the corn trade. He had regarded his wife, the only daughter of a rich farmer of La Brie, with a devout admiration. His love for her had been boundless. Goriot had felt the charm of a lovely and sensitive nature, which, in its delicate strength, was the very opposite of his own. Is there any instinct more deeply implanted in the heart of man than the pride of protection, a protection which is constantly exerted for a fragile and defenseless creature? Join love thereto, the warmth of gratitude that all generous souls feel for the source of their pleasures, and you have the explanation of many strange incongruities in human nature. After 7 years of unclouded happiness, Goriot lost his wife. It was very unfortunate for him. She was beginning to gain an ascendancy over him in other ways. Possibly she might have brought that barren soil under cultivation, she might have widened his ideas and given other directions to his thoughts. But when she was dead, the instinct of fatherhood developed in him till it almost became a mania. All the affection balked by death seemed to turn to his daughters, and he found full satisfaction for his heart in loving them. More or less brilliant proposals were made to him from time to time. Wealthy merchants or farmers with daughters vied with each other in offering inducements to him to marry again. But he determined to remain a widower. His father-in-law, the only man for whom he felt a decided friendship, gave out that Goriot had made a vow to be faithful to his wife's memory. The frequenters of the Corn Exchange, who could not comprehend this sublime piece of folly, joked about it among themselves, and found a ridiculous nickname for him. One of them ventured, after a glass over a bargain, to call him by it, and a blow from the vermicelli maker's fist sent him headlong into a gutter in the Rue Oblin. He could think of nothing else when his children were concerned. His love for them made him fidgety and anxious. And this was so well known, that one day a competitor, who wished to get rid of him to secure the field to himself, told Goriot that Delphine had just been knocked down by a cab. The vermicelli maker turned ghastly pale, left the exchange at once, and did not return for several days afterwards. He was ill in consequence of the shot and the subsequent relief on discovering that it was a false alarm. This time, however, the offender did not escape with a bruised shoulder. At a critical moment in the man's affairs, Goriot drove him into bankruptcy and forced him to disappear from the Corn Exchange. As might have been expected, the two girls were spoiled. With an income of 60,000 francs, Goriot scarcely spent 1,200 on himself, and found all his happiness in satisfying the whims of the two girls. The best masters were engaged, that Anastasie and Delphine might be endowed with all the accomplishments which distinguish a good education. They had a chaperone luckily for them. She was a woman who had good sense and good taste. They learned to ride. They had a carriage for their use. They lived as the mistress of a rich old lord might live. They had only to express a wish, their father would hasten to give them their most extravagant desires, and asked nothing of them in return but a kiss. Goriot had raised the two girls to the level of the angels, and, quite naturally, he himself was left beneath them. Poor man! He loved them even for the pain that they gave him. When the girls were old enough to be married, they were left free to choose for themselves. Each had half her father's fortune as her dowry. And when the Comte de Ristod came to woo Anastasie for her beauty, her social aspirations led her to leave her father's house for a more exalted sphere. Delphine wished for money. She married Nucingen, a banker of German extraction, who became a baron of the Holy Roman Empire. Goriot remained a vermicelli maker as before. His daughters and his sons-in-law began to demur. They did not like to see him still engaged in trade, though his whole life was bound up with his business. For 5 years he stood out against their entreaties, then he yielded, and consented to retire on the amount realized by the sale of his business and the savings of the last few years. It was this capital that Vocker, in the early days of his residence with her, had calculated would bring in 8 or 10,000 livres in a year. He had taken refuge in her lodging house, driven there by despair when he knew that his daughters were compelled by their husbands not only to refuse to receive him as an inmate in their houses, but even to see him no more except in private. This was all the information which Rastignac gained from M. Moret, who had purchased Goriot's business, information which confirmed the Duchess de Langeais' suppositions, and herewith the preliminary explanation of this obscure but terrible Parisian tragedy comes to an end. Towards the end of the first week in December, Rastignac received 2 letters, one from his mother, and one from his eldest sister. His heart beat fast, half with happiness, half with fear, at the sight of the familiar handwriting. Those 2 little scraps of paper contained life or death for his hopes. But while he felt a shiver of dread as he remembered their dire poverty at home, he knew their love for him so well that he could not help fearing that he was draining their very lifeblood. His mother's letter ran as follows. My dear child, I am sending you the money that you asked for. Make a good use of it. Even to save your life I could not raise so large a sum a second time without your father's knowledge, and there would be trouble about it. We should be obliged to mortgage the land. It is impossible to judge of the merits of schemes of which I am ignorant. But what sort of schemes can they be that you should fear to tell me about them? Volumes of explanation would not have been needed. We mothers can understand at a word, and that word would have spared me the anguish of uncertainty. I do not know how to hide the painful impression that your letter has made upon me, my dear son. What can you have felt when you were moved to send this chill of dread through my heart? It must have been very painful to you to write the letter that gave me so much pain as I read it. To what courses are you committed? You are going to appear to be something that you are not, and your whole life and success depends upon this. You are about to see a society into which you cannot enter without rushing into expense that you cannot afford, without losing precious time that is needed for your studies. Oh, my dear Eugene, believe your mother, crooked ways cannot lead to great ends. Patience and endurance are the 2 qualities most needed in your position. I am not scolding you. I do not want any tinge of bitterness to spoil our offering. I am only talking like a mother whose trust in you is as great as her foresight for you. You know the steps that you must take, and I, for my part, know the purity of heart, and how good your intentions are. So I can say to you without a doubt, go forward, beloved. If I tremble, it is because I am a mother, but my prayers and blessings will be with you at every step. Be very careful, dear boy. You must have a man's prudence, for it lies with you to shape the destinies of 5 others who are dear to you, and must look to you. Yes, our fortunes depend upon you, and your success is ours. We all pray to God to be with you in all that you do. Your Aunt Marcillac has been most generous beyond words in this matter. She saw at once how it was, even down to your gloves. But I have a weakness for the eldest, she said gaily. You must love your aunt very much, dear Eugene. I shall wait till you have succeeded before telling you all that she has done for you, or her money would burn your fingers. You, who are young, do not know what it is to part with something that is a piece of your past. But what would we not sacrifice for your sakes? Your aunt says that I am to send you a kiss on the forehead from her, and that kiss is to bring you luck again and again, she says. She would have written you herself, the dear kind-hearted woman, but she is troubled with the gout in her fingers just now. Your father is very well. The vintage of 1819 has turned out better than we expected. Goodbye, dear boy. I will say nothing about your sisters, because Laura is writing to you, and I must let her have the pleasure of giving you all the home news. Heaven send that you may succeed. Oh, yes, dear Eugene, you must succeed. I have come, through you, to a knowledge of a pain so sharp that I do not think I could endure it a second time. I have come to know what it is to be poor, and to long for money for my children's sake. There, goodbye. Do not leave us for long without news of you. And here, at the last, take a kiss from your mother. By the time Eugene had finished the letter he was in tears. He thought of Father Goriot crushing his silver keepsake into a shapeless mass before he sold it to meet his daughter's bill of exchange. Your mother has broken up her jewels for you, he said to himself. Your aunt shed tears over those relics of hers before she sold them for your sake. What right have you to heap execrations on apostasy? You have followed her example. You have selfishly sacrificed others to your own future, and she sacrifices her father to her lover. And of you two, which is the worse? He was ready to renounce his attempts. He could not bear to take that money. The fires of remorse burned in his heart, and gave him intolerable pain, the generous secret remorse which men seldom take into account when they sit in judgment upon their fellow men. But perhaps the angels in heaven, beholding it, pardon the criminal whom our justice condemns. Rastignac opened his sister's letter. Its simplicity and kindness revived his heart. Your letter came just at the right time, dear brother. Agath and I had thought of so many different ways of spending our money that we did not know what to buy with it. And now you have come in, and like the servant who upset all the watches that belonged to the King of Spain, you have restored harmony. For, really and truly, we did not know which of all the things we wanted most, and we were always quarreling about it, never thinking, dear Eugene, of a way of spending our money which would satisfy us completely. Agath jumped for you. Indeed, we have been like two mad things all day, to such a prodigious degree, as Aunt would say, that Mother said, with her severe expression, whatever can be the matter with you, mesdemoiselles? I think if we had been scolded a little, we should have been still better pleased. A woman ought to be very glad to suffer for one she loves. I, however, in my inmost soul, was doleful and cross in the midst of all my joy. I shall make a bad wife, I am afraid. I am too fond of spending. I had bought 2 sashes and a nice little stiletto for piercing eyelet holes in my stays, trifles that I really did not want, so that I have less than that slow coach Agath, who is so economical, and hoards her money like a magpie. She had 200 francs, and I have only 150. I am nicely punished. I could throw my sash down the well. It will be painful to me to wear it now. Poor dear, I have robbed you. And Agath was so nice about it. She said, let us send the 350 francs in our 2 names. But I could not help telling you everything just as it happened. Do you know how we managed to keep your commandments? We took our glittering hoard, we went out for a walk, and when once fairly on the highway we ran all the way to Ruffick, where we handed over the coin, without more ado, to M. Grimbert of the Medgeries Royals. We came back again like swallows on the wing. Don't you think that happiness has made us lighter? Agath said. We said all sorts of things, which I shall not tell you, Monsieur le Parisien, because they were all about you. Oh, we love you dearly, dear brother. It was all summed up in those few words. As for keeping the secret, little masqueraders like us are capable of anything, according to our aunt, even of holding our tongues. Our mother has been on a mysterious journey to Angoulême, and the aunt went with her, not without solemn counsels, from which we were shut out, and le Baron likewise. They are silent as to the weighty political considerations that prompted their mission, and conjectures are rife in the state of Rastignac. The Infantas are embroidering a muslin robe with open work sprigs for Her Majesty the Queen. The work progresses in the most profound secrecy. There be but 2 more breadths to finish. A decree has gone forth that no wall shall be built on the side of Vertulo, but that a hedge shall be planted instead thereof. Our subjects may sustain some disappointment of fruit and espaliers, but strangers will enjoy a fair prospect. Should the heir presumptive lack pocket handkerchiefs, be it known unto him that the Dowager Lady of Marsillac, exploring the recesses of her drawers and boxes, known respectively as Pompeii and Herculaneum, having brought to light a fair piece of cambric whereof she wotted not, the Princesses Agave and Laure place at their brother's disposal their thread, their needles, and hands somewhat of the reddest. The 2 young princes, Don Henry and Don Gabriel, retain their fatal habits of stuffing themselves with grape jelly, of teasing their sisters, of taking their pleasure by going a bird nesting, and of cutting switches for themselves from the osier beds maugre the laws of the realm. Moreover, they list not to learn naught, wherefore the papal nuncio, called of the commonalty la cure, threateneth them with excommunication, since that they neglect the sacred canons of grammatical construction for the construction of other canon, deadly engines made of the stems of elder. Farewell, dear brother, never did letter carry so many wishes for your success, so much love fully satisfied. You will have a great deal to tell us when you come home. You will tell me everything, won't you? I am the oldest. From something the aunt let fall, we think you must have had some success. Something was said of a lady, but nothing more was said. Of course not, in our family. Oh, by the by, Eugene, would you rather that we made that piece of cambric into shirts for you instead of pocket handkerchiefs? If you want some really nice shirts at once, we ought to lose no time in beginning upon them. And if the fashion is different now in Paris, send us one for a pattern. We want more particularly to know about the cuffs. Goodbye. Goodbye. Take my kiss on the left side of your forehead, on the temple that belongs to me and to no one else in the world. I am leaving the other side of the sheet for Agave, who has solemnly promised not to read a word that I have written. But, all the same, I mean to sit by her side while she writes, so as to be quite sure that she keeps her word, your loving sister. Lord Rastignac. Yes, said Eugene to himself. Yes, success at all costs now. Riches could not repay such devotion as this. I wish I could give them every sort of happiness. 1,550 francs, he went on after a pause. Every shot must go to the mark. Laure is right. Trust a woman. I have only calico shirts. Where someone else's welfare is concerned, a young girl becomes as ingenious as a thief. Guileless where she herself is in question, and full of foresight. For me she is like a heavenly angel, forgiving the strange incomprehensible sins of earth. The world lay before him. His tailor had been summoned and sounded, and had finally surrendered. When Rastignac met M. de Trailles, he had seen at once how great a part the tailor plays in a young man's career. A tailor is either a deadly enemy or a staunch friend, with an invoice for a bond of friendship. Between these 2 extremes there is, alack, no middle term. In this representative of his craft Eugene discovered a man who understood that his was a sort of paternal function for young men at their entrance into life, who regarded himself as a stepping stone between a young man's present and future. And Rastignac in gratitude made the man's fortune by an epigram of a kind in which he excelled at a later period of his life. I have twice known a pair of trousers turned out by him make a match of 20,000 livres a year. 1,500 francs, and as many suits of clothes as he chose to order. At that moment the poor child of the South felt no more doubts of any kind. The young man went down to breakfast with the indefinable air which the consciousness of the possession of money gives to youth. No sooner are the coins slipped into a student's pocket than his wealth, in imagination at least, is piled into a fantastic column, which affords him a moral support. He begins to hold up his head as he walks. He is conscious that he has a means of bringing his purse to bear on a given point. He looks you straight in the face. His gestures are quick and decided. Only yesterday he was diffident and shy, anyone might have pushed him aside. Tomorrow, he will take the wall of a prime minister. A miracle has been wrought in him. Nothing is beyond the reach of his ambition, and his ambition soars at random. He is light-hearted, generous, and enthusiastic. In short, the fledgling bird has discovered that he has wings. A poor student snatches at every chance pleasure much as a dog runs all sorts of risks to steal a bone, cracking it and sucking the marrow as he flies from pursuit. But a young man who can rattle a few runaway gold coins in his pocket can take his pleasure deliberately, can taste the whole of the sweets of secure possession. He soars far above earth. He has forgotten what the word poverty means. All Paris is his. Those are days when the whole world shines radiant with light, when everything glows and sparkles before the eyes of youth, days that bring joyous energy that is never brought into harness, days of debts and of painful fears that go hand in hand with every delight. Those who do not know the left bank of the Seine between the Rue Saint-Jacques and the Rue des Saints-Pères know nothing of life. Oh, if the women of Paris but knew, said Rastignac, as he devoured me. Walkers stood pairs at 5 for a penny, they would come here in search of a lover. Just then a porter from the Mégeries Royals appeared at the door of the room. They had previously heard the bell ring as the wicket opened to admit him. The man asked for Eugene de Rastignac, holding out 2 bags for him to take, and a form of receipt for his signature. Vautrin's keen glance cut Eugene like a lash. Now you will be able to pay for those fencing lessons and go to the shooting gallery, he said. Your ship has come in, said me. Vautrin, eyeing the bags. Bull. Michonneau did not dare to look at the money, for fear her eyes should betray her cupidity. You have a kind mother, said me. Couture. You have a kind mother, sir, echoed Poiret. Yes, Mama has been drained dry, said Vautrin, and now you can have your fling, go into society, and fish for heiresses, and dance with countesses who have peach blossom in their hair. But take my advice, young man, and don't neglect your pistol practice. Vautrin struck an attitude, as if he were facing an antagonist. Rastignac, meaning to give the porter a tip, felt in his pockets and found nothing. Vautrin flung down a franc piece on the table. Your credit is good, he remarked, eyeing the student, and Rastignac was forced to thank him, though, since the sharp encounter of wits at dinner that day, after Eugene came in from calling on me, debossant, he had made up his mind that Vautrin was insufferable. For a week, in fact, they had both kept silence in each other's presence, and watched each other. The student tried in vain to account to himself for this attitude. An idea, of course, gains in force by the energy with which it is expressed. It strikes where the brain sends it, by a law as mathematically exact as the law that determines the course of a shell from a mortar. The amount of impression it makes is not to be determined so exactly. Sometimes, in an impressible nature, the idea works havoc, but there are, no less, natures so robustly protected, that this sort of projectile falls flat and harmless on skulls of triple brass, as cannon shot against solid masonry. Then there are flaccid and spongy fibred natures into which ideas from without sink like spent bullets into the earthworks of a redoubt. Rastignac's head was something of the powder magazine order. The least shock sufficed to bring about an explosion. He was too quick, too young, not to be readily accessible to ideas, and open to that subtle influence of thought and feeling in others which causes so many strange phenomena that make an impression upon us of which we are all unconscious at the time. Nothing escaped his mental vision. He was lynx-eyed. In him the mental powers of perception, which seem like duplicates of the senses, had the mysterious power of swift projection that astonishes us in intellects of a high order, slingers who are quick to detect the weak spot in any armor. In the past month Eugene's good qualities and defect had rapidly developed with his character. Intercourse with the world and the endeavor to satisfy his growing desires had brought out his defect. But Rastignac came from the south side of the Loire, and had the good qualities of his countrymen. He had the impetuous courage of the south, that rushes to the attack of a difficulty, as well as the southern impatience of delay or suspense. These traits are held to be defect in the north. They made the fortune of Murat, but they likewise cut short his career. The moral would appear to be that when the dash and boldness of the south side of the Loire meets, in a southern temperament, with the guile of the north, the character is complete, and such a man will gain, and keep, the crown of Sweden. Rastignac, therefore, could not stand the fire from Vautrin's batteries for long without discovering whether this was a friend or a foe. He felt as if this strange being was reading his inmost soul, and dissecting his feelings, while Vautrin himself was so close and secretive that he seemed to have something of the profound and unmoved serenity of a sphinx, seeing and hearing all things and saying nothing. Eugene, conscious of that money in his pocket, grew rebellious. "Be so good as to wait a moment," he said to Vautrin, as the latter rose, after slowly emptying his coffee cup, sip by sip. "What for?" inquired the older man, as he put on his large brimmed hat and took up the sword cane that he was wont to twirl like a man who will face 3 or 4 footpads without flinching. I will repay you in a minute, returned Eugene. He unsealed one of the bags as he spoke, counted out 140 francs, and pushed them towards me. Vocker. Short reckonings make good friends, he added, turning to the widow. That clears our accounts till the end of the year. Can you give me change for a 5-franc piece? Good friends make short reckonings, echoed Poiret, with a glance at Vautrin. Here is your franc, said Rastignac, holding out the coin to the Sphinx in the black wig. Anyone might think that you were afraid to owe me a trifle, exclaimed this latter, with a searching glance that seemed to read the young man's inmost thoughts. There was a satirical and cynical smile on Vautrin's face such as Eugene had seen scores of times already. Every time he saw it, it exasperated him almost beyond endurance. Well, so I am, he answered. He held both the bags in his hand, and had risen to go up to his room. Vautrin made as if he were going out through the sitting room, and the student turned to go through the second door that opened into the square lobby at the foot of the staircase. Do you know, Monsieur le Marquis de Rastignac, that what you were saying just now was not exactly polite? Vautrin remarked, as he rattled his sword cane across the panels of the sitting room door, and came up to the student. Rastignac looked coolly at Vautrin, drew him to the foot of the staircase, and shut the dining room door. They were standing in the little square lobby between the kitchen and the dining room. The place was lighted by an iron-barred fanlight above a door that gave access into the garden. Sylvie came out of her kitchen, and Eugene chose that moment to say, Monsieur Vautrin, I am not a marquis, and my name is not Rastignac. They will fight, said Goulue. Michono, in an indifferent tone. Fight, echoed Poiret. Not they, replied me. Vocker, lovingly fingering her pile of coins. But there they are under the lime trees, cried Goulue. Victorine, who had risen so that she might see out into the garden. Poor young man. He was in the right, after all. We must go upstairs, my pet, said me. Couture. It is no business of ours. At the door, however, me. Couture and Victorine found their progress barred by the portly form of Sylvie the cook. Whatever can have happened? She said. Vautrin said to Eugene, let us have an explanation. Then he took him by the arm, and there they are, out among the artichokes. Vautrin came in while she was speaking. Mama Vocker, he said, smiling, don't frighten yourself at all. I am only going to try my pistols under the lime trees. Oh, monsieur, cried Victorine, clasping her hands as she spoke, why do you want to kill Eugene? Vautrin stepped back a pace or two, and gazed at Victorine. Oh, this is something fresh, he exclaimed in a bantering tone that brought the color into the poor girl's face. That young fellow yonder is very nice, isn't he? He went on. You have given me a notion, my pretty child. I will make you both happy. Me. Couture laid her hand on the arm of her ward, and drew the girl away, as she said in her ear, why, Victorine, I cannot imagine what has come over you this morning. I don't want any shots fired in my garden, said me. Vocker. You will frighten the neighborhood and bring the police up here all in a moment. Come, keep cool, Mama Vocker, answered Vautrin. There. It's all right. We will go to the shooting gallery. He went back to Rastignac, laying his hand familiarly on the young man's arm. When I have given you a clear demonstration of the fact that I can put a bullet through the ace on a card 5 times running at 35 paces, he said, that won't take away your appetite, I suppose. You look to me to be inclined to be a trifle quarrelsome this morning, and as if you would rush on your death like a blockhead. Do you draw back? Asked Eugene. Don't try to raise my temperature, answered Vautrin. It is not cold this morning. Let us go and sit over there, he added, pointing to the green-painted garden seats. No one can overhear us. I want a little talk with you. You are not a bad sort of youngster, and I have no quarrel with you. I like you, take Trump, confound it, take Vautrin's word for it. What makes me like you? I will tell you by and by. Meantime, I can tell you that I know you as well as if I had made you myself, as I will prove to you in a minute. Put down your bags, he continued, pointing to the round table. Rastignac deposited his money on the table, and sat down. He was consumed with curiosity, which the sudden change in the manner of the man before him had excited to the highest pitch. Here was a strange being who, a moment ago, had talked of killing him, and now posed as his protector. You would like to know who I really am, what I was, and what I do now, Vautrin went on. You want to know too much, youngster. Come, keep cool. You will hear more astonishing things than that. I have had my misfortunes. Just hear me out first, and you shall have your turn afterwards. Here is my past in 3 words. Who am I, Vautrin? What do I do? Just what I please. Let us change the subject. You want to know my character. I am good-natured to those who do me a good turn, or to those whose hearts speak to mine. These last may do anything they like with me. They may bruise my shins, and I shall not tell them to mind what they are about. But Nomdi and Pipe, the devil himself, is not an uglier customer than I can be if people annoy me, or if I don't happen to take to them. And you may just as well know at once that I think no more of killing a man than of that. And he spat before him as he spoke. Only when it is absolutely necessary to do so, I do my best to kill him properly. I am what you call an artist. I have read Benvenuto Cellini's memoirs, such as You See Me, and, what is more, in Italian. A fine-spirited fellow he was. From him I learned to follow the example set us by Providence, who strikes us down at random, and to admire the beautiful whenever and wherever it is found. And, setting other questions aside, is it not a glorious part to play, when you pit yourself against mankind, and the luck is on your side? I have thought a good deal about the constitution of your present social disorder. A duel is downright childish, my boy, utter nonsense and folly. When one of two living men must be got out of the way, none but an idiot would leave chance to decide which it is to be. And in a duel it is a toss-up, heads or tails, and there you are. Now I, for instance, can hit the ace in the middle of a card 5 times running, send one bullet after another through the same hole, and at 35 paces moreover. With that little accomplishment you might think yourself certain of killing your man, mightn't you? Well, I have fired at 20 paces and missed, and the rogue who had never handled a pistol in his life, look here, he unbuttoned his waistcoat and exposed his chest, covered like a bear's back, with a shaggy fell. The student gave a startled shudder. He was a raw lad, but he made his mark on me, the extraordinary man went on, drawing Rastignac's fingers over a deep scar on his breast. But that happened when I myself was a mere boy. I was 21 then, your age, and I had some beliefs left in a woman's love, and in a pack of rubbish that you will be over head and ears indirectly. You and I were to have fought just now, weren't we? You might have killed me. Suppose that I were put under the earth, where would you be? You would have to clear out of this, go to Switzerland, draw on Papa's purse, and he has none too much in it as it is. I mean to open your eyes to your real position. That is what I am going to do. But I shall do it from the point of view of a man who, after studying the world very closely, sees that there are but two alternatives: stupid obedience or revolt. I obey nobody. Is that clear? Now, do you know how much you will want at the pace you are going? 1,000,000. And promptly, too, or that little head of ours will be swaying to and fro in the dragnets at St. Cloud, while we are gone to find out whether or no there is a supreme being. I will put you in the way of that 1,000,000. He stopped for a moment and looked at Eugene. Aha! You do not look so sourly at Papa Vautrin now. At the mention of the 1,000,000 you look like a young girl when somebody has said, I will come for you this evening, and she betakes herself to her toilet as a cat licks its whiskers over a saucer of milk. All right. Come, now, let us go into the question, young man. All between ourselves, you know. We have a papa and mama down yonder, a great aunt, 2 sisters, aged 18 and 17, 2 young brothers, one 15, and the other 10. That is about the roll call of the crew. The aunt brings up the 2 sisters. The cure comes and teaches the boys Latin. Boiled chestnuts are oftener on the table than white bread. Papa makes a suit of clothes last a long while. If mama has a different dress winter and summer, it is about as much as she has. The sisters manage as best they can. I know all about it. I have lived in the south. That is how things are at home. They send you 1,200 francs a year, and the whole property only brings in 3,000 francs all told. We have a cook and a manservant. Papa is a baron, and we must keep up appearances. Then we have our ambitions. We are connected with the Bosants, and we go afoot through the streets. We want to be rich, and we have not a penny. We eat me Vauquer's messes, and we like grand dinners in the Faubourg Saint-Germain. We sleep on a truckle bed, and dream of a mansion. I do not blame you for wanting these things. What sort of men do the women run after? Men of ambition. Men of ambition have stronger frames, their blood is richer in iron, their hearts are warmer than those of ordinary men. Women feel that when their power is greatest, they look their best, and that those are their happiest hours. They like power in men, and prefer the strongest even if it is a power that may be their own destruction. I am going to make an inventory of your desires in order to put the question at issue before you. Here it is. We are as hungry as a wolf, and those newly cut teeth of ours are sharp. What are we to do to keep the pot boiling? In the first place, we have the code to browse upon. It is not amusing, and we are none the wiser for it, but that cannot be helped. So far so good. We mean to make an advocate of ourselves with the prospect of one day being made president of a court of assize, when we shall send poor devils, our betters, to the galleys with a TF. Translator remark, travaux forces, forced labor. End of translator remark on their shoulders, so that the rich may be convinced that they can sleep in peace. There is no fun in that. And you are a long while coming to it. For, to begin with, there are 2 years of nauseous drudgery in Paris. We see all the lollipops that we long for out of our reach. It is tiresome to want things and never to have them. If you were a pallid creature of the mollusk order, you would have nothing to fear, but it is different when you have the hot blood of a lion and are ready to get into a score of scrapes every day of your life. This is the ghastliest form of torture known in this inferno of God's making, and you will give in to it. Or suppose that you are a good boy, drink nothing stronger than milk, and bemoan your hard lot. You, with your generous nature, will endure hardships that would drive a dog mad, and make a start, after long waiting, as deputy to some rascal or other in a hole of a place where the government will fling you 1,000 francs a year like the scraps that are thrown to the butcher's dog. Bark at thieves, plead the cause of the rich, send men of heart to the guillotine, that is your work. Many thanks. If you have no influence, you may rot in your provincial tribunal. At 30 you will be a justice with 1,200 francs a year, if you have not flung off the gown for good before then. By the time you are 40 you may look to marry a miller's daughter, an heiress with some 6,000 livres a year. Much obliged. If you have influence, you may possibly be a public prosecutor by the time you are 30. With a salary of 1,000 crowns, you could look to marry the mayor's daughter. Some petty piece of political trickery, such as mistaking Villel for Manuel in a bulletin, the names rhyme, and that quiets your conscience, and you will probably be a procureur general by the time you are 40, with a chance of becoming a deputy. Please to observe, my dear boy, that our conscience will have been a little damaged in the process, and that we shall endure 20 years of drudgery and hidden poverty, and that our sisters are wearing Diane's livery. I have the honor to call your attention to another fact. To wit, that there are but 20 procureurs generaux at a time in all France, while there are some 20,000 of you young men who aspire to that elevated position. That there are some mountebanks among you who would sell their family to screw their fortunes a peg higher. If this sort of thing sickens you, try another course. The Baron de Rastignac thinks of becoming an advocate, does he? There's a nice prospect for you. 10 years of drudgery straight away. You are obliged to live at the rate of 1,000 francs a month. You must have a library of law books, live in chambers, go into society, go down on your knees to ask a solicitor for briefs, lick the dust off the floor of the Palais de Justice. If this kind of business led to anything, I should not say no. But just give me the names of 5 advocates here in Paris who by the time that they are 50 are making 50,000 francs a year. Bah! I would sooner turn pirate on the high seas than have my soul shrivel up inside me like that. How will you find the capital? There is but one way, marry a woman who has money. There is no fun in it. Have you a mind to marry? You hang a stone around your neck. For if you marry for money, what becomes of our exalted notions of honor and so forth? You might as well fly in the face of social conventions at once. Is it nothing to crawl like a serpent before your wife, to lick her mother's feet, to descend to dirty actions that would sicken swine for never mind if you at least make your fortune. But you will be as doleful as a dripstone if you marry for money. It is better to wrestle with men than to wrangle at home with your wife. You are at the crossway of the roads of life, my boy. Choose your way.